The peach blossoms seemed to drift on the spring breeze like snowflakes, settling gently upon the forgotten corner of the imperial gardens where Tabitha Thornhill knelt among the violets. Her fingers, once smooth and unblemished like those of other ladies at the Austro-Hungarian court, had grown calloused from her secret labor. She preferred it that way, preferred the honest dirt beneath her fingernails to the painted facades of Vienna's elite. "You're planting them too close together," came a voice from behind the hedgerow. Tabitha startled, nearly dropping her trowel. The imperial gardens were supposed to be empty at this early hour, the dew still clinging to the grass. She had chosen this time specifically to avoid being discovered by anyone who might report her unladylike behavior to her aunt, the Countess von Lehmann. "The violets need room to breathe," the voice continued, closer now. A tall figure emerged from behind the yew hedge, dressed in simple gardening clothes rather than the formal attire she had grown accustomed to seeing at court. His face was kind, if somewhat weathered, and his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "I beg your pardon," Tabitha said, quickly attempting to rise and curtsy despite her muddy apron and disheveled appearance. "I didn't realize anyone else would be here." "I'm not supposed to, please," he interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Don't stand on ceremony for me. I'm only the gardener's assistant." He gestured to her violets. "May I?" Hesitantly, Tabitha nodded, and the man knelt beside her, his movements fluid and practiced. He took the trowel from her hand, his fingers brushing against hers briefly, and began to carefully redistribute her plantings. "I'm Warren," he said without looking up. "Warren Lockwood." "Tabitha Thornhill," she replied, watching as he worked. "I'm staying with my aunt, the Countess. Just until other arrangements can be made." Warren nodded, seemingly uninterested in her family connections, a refreshing change from the court, where lineage was currency and marriage prospects the only topic deemed suitable for young ladies. "You have a natural touch," he commented, handing back her trowel. "But violets can be temperamental. They need space, good soil, and patience." He smiled again, and Tabitha felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. "Much like people, I suppose," she replied. "Indeed." Warren stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "Will you be here tomorrow? I could bring some chamomile seedlings. They would complement the violets nicely." Tabitha hesitated. She knew she should decline. Her aunt would be furious if she discovered Tabitha consorting with a servant, especially a male one. But the thought of returning to the stuffy drawing rooms and endless lessons in deportment made her heart sink. "I would like that," she said finally. "Same time." Warren nodded, then glanced toward the palace. "You should go. The head gardener will be making his rounds soon, and I suspect you'd rather not explain your presence." With a grateful smile, Tabitha gathered her things and hurried back toward the palace, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Over the following weeks, their early morning meetings became the one bright spot in Tabitha's increasingly constrained existence. While Vienna buzzed with preparations for the imperial ball, the event that would mark the beginning of Emperor Franz Joseph's search for a bride for his nephew, Archduke Ferdinand, Tabitha found solace in the quiet corners of the garden with Warren. He taught her about soil composition and plant companionship, while she shared stories of England, the home she had left behind after her father's disgrace and subsequent death. They never spoke of court politics or the growing tensions between the empire's many ethnic factions, subjects that dominated every conversation inside the palace walls. "Your accent is unusual," Tabitha remarked one morning as they transplanted roses. "You're not from Vienna, are you?" Warren hesitated, his hand stilling. "No," he admitted. "My family moved around quite a bit. My father was in diplomatic service." "And how does the son of a diplomat become a gardener's assistant?" Tabitha asked, immediately regretting her question when she saw his expression darken. "The same way the daughter of an English gentleman ends up in exile at the Austro-Hungarian court, I imagine," he replied, his tone gentle despite the pointed observation. "Life rarely follows the paths we expect." Tabitha felt her cheeks flush. "I'm sorry. That was thoughtless of me." Warren's expression softened. "No need for apologies between friends," he said, and Tabitha felt a curious flutter at the word friends. In the month since her arrival in Vienna, she had met countless nobles, attended dozens of teas and musicales, yet Warren was the first person with whom she felt truly at ease. "My father was accused of embezzling funds from the British diplomatic corps," she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could reconsider. "He maintained his innocence until the end, but the evidence was compelling. He took his own life rather than face imprisonment." Warren's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "I'm sorry. My mother died when I was young. With father gone and our family name in tatters, my aunt, my mother's sister, offered to take me in. She believed a few seasons at the Habsburg court might help me secure a suitable match despite the scandal." "And is that what you want? A suitable match?" Tabitha stared at the roses they had planted, their thorns sharp and defensive. "What I want hardly matters. Girls in my position can't afford the luxury of choice." Warren was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps the imperial ball will hold some surprises for you," he said finally. "I hear the Archduke is more progressive than his uncle. He might value sincerity over status." Tabitha laughed, though the sound held little humor. "Even if that were true, I'm hardly a candidate for an Archduke's attention. Aunt has made it quite clear that my best hope is a minor noble willing to overlook my family's disgrace in exchange for what remains of my dowry." Before Warren could respond, the distant sound of the palace clock striking 7 made Tabitha jump to her feet. "I must go. Aunt has arranged for final fittings of my ball gown this morning." As she hurried away, Tabitha couldn't shake the feeling that Warren had been about to say something important, something that might have changed everything. The night of the imperial ball arrived with all the pomp and spectacle Vienna could muster. The palace blazed with light, orchestras played in each ballroom, and the empire's nobility displayed their wealth and status through jewels and elaborate costumes. Tabitha stood at the periphery of the main ballroom, her mask, a delicate creation of silver filigree and blue feathers, concealing her apprehension. Her aunt had spent a small fortune on her appearance tonight, commissioning a gown of midnight blue silk that transformed Tabitha from a mousy exile to a mysterious beauty. "Remember," the Countess had whispered before they separated, "this is your opportunity. Count Esterhazy has expressed interest, and while he is considerably older, his estates in Hungary would provide generously for you." Now, watching the masked figures twirl across the polished floor, Tabitha felt a profound loneliness. She thought of Warren and their garden, wishing she could share with him the absurdity of it all, the artificial laughter, the political maneuverings thinly veiled as romantic overtures. "May I have this dance?" The voice startled her from her reverie. Before her stood a tall figure in the formal white uniform of an imperial officer, his face obscured by a simple black mask. Something about him seemed familiar, though Tabitha couldn't place why. Yes, thank you," she replied, allowing him to lead her onto the floor as the orchestra began a waltz. His hand at her waist was confident, his steps measured and graceful. Unlike other partners who had used the intimacy of the dance to press too close or whisper inappropriate suggestions, this man maintained a respectful distance while still guiding her with ease through the complex patterns. "You dance beautifully," he commented, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "As do you," Tabitha responded. "Though I confess, I don't recognize you. Are you with one of the diplomatic missions?" A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. "In a manner of speaking. And you? You're not Viennese." "English," she admitted. "Staying with relatives." "Ah, England." His eyes, visible through the mask, seemed to brighten. "I've always admired the English gardens. There's something honest about them, less rigid than our formal parterres." Tabitha's heart skipped a beat. The comment was innocuous enough, but it reminded her immediately of Warren. She had not seen him for 3 days, their morning ritual interrupted by the frenzy of ball preparations. "You're interested in gardens?" she asked. "Very much so. I find peace there that eludes me elsewhere." As they continued to dance, their conversation flowed with surprising ease. He asked about England, about her impressions of Vienna, but never about her family or connections, topics that usually dominated such exchanges. In turn, Tabitha found herself speaking more freely than she had with anyone besides Warren, sharing observations and even gentle criticisms of court life that would have horrified her aunt. "You're different from the others," he said as the waltz ended, still holding her hand. "Refreshingly so." Before Tabitha could respond, a commotion near the grand entrance drew everyone's attention. The master of ceremonies struck his staff against the marble floor 3 times, and the room fell silent. His Imperial and Royal Majesty, Emperor Franz Joseph, and His Imperial Highness, Archduke Ferdinand. The crowd parted as the Emperor entered, resplendent in military dress, followed by the Archduke, whose face remained partially obscured by an ornate golden mask. "I must go," her partner said suddenly, releasing her hand. "But I hope we might speak again before the night is through." Before Tabitha could ask his name, he disappeared into the crowd now surging toward the Imperial party. She stood momentarily abandoned on the dance floor, a strange sense of loss washing over her. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and dances. Count Esterhazy, as her aunt had predicted, sought her out, a corpulent man with wandering hands and breath that reeked of cigars and brandy. Tabitha endured his attention with as much grace as she could muster, all while scanning the crowd for her mysterious dance partner. It was nearing midnight when she finally managed to escape onto a terrace for a moment of respite. The spring air was cool against her flushed skin, the gardens below silvered by moonlight. She thought of Warren again, wondering if he would be there in the morning, or if their brief friendship had already run its course. "The stars are particularly bright tonight," came a voice from the shadows. Tabitha turned to find her dance partner from earlier, his mask still in place, leaning against the stone balustrade. "I thought you'd left," she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "I had obligations to attend to," he replied, moving closer. "But I couldn't leave without speaking to you again." In the moonlight, with the sounds of the ball muted behind them, Tabitha felt a curious sense of déjà vu, as if they had stood like this before, in another time and place. "Will you walk with me?" he asked, offering his arm. "The palace gardens are beautiful at night." Caution warred with curiosity in Tabitha's mind. It was highly improper to wander alone with a man whose name she didn't even know, yet something about him inspired trust. "Just for a moment," she agreed, taking his arm. "My aunt will be looking for me." He led her down a stone staircase to a path that wound through formal parterres and elaborate fountains. As they walked, he pointed out rare specimens and shared anecdotes about the garden's history with the ease of someone intimately familiar with them. "You know a great deal for a visiting diplomat," Tabitha observed. He chuckled, a warm sound that stirred something in her memory. "I have many interests beyond diplomacy." They had reached a secluded corner where a small bench sat beneath a blossoming cherry tree. The air was sweet with its scent, reminiscent of her morning meetings with Warren. "May I ask you something?" he said as they sat a day. "Something rather forward." Tabitha's pulse quickened, but she nodded. "Are you happy here?" "In Vienna, I mean." The question caught her off guard. It was not what she had expected, not a declaration or improper advance, but a sincere inquiry about her well-being. I don't know," she answered truthfully. "It's not a question I've allowed myself to consider." "Because of your father?" Tabitha stiffened. "How do you know about my father?" The man beside her seemed to realize his mistake. He removed his mask slowly, and Tabitha gasped as the moonlight revealed Warren's familiar features, now clean-shaven and framed by hair that had been trimmed and styled in the court fashion. "Warren? But why are you?" "My name is Wilhelm," he said quietly. "Wilhelm Leopold, though my friends call me Warren. I am Archduke Ferdinand's cousin and adjutant." Tabitha stood abruptly, feeling as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "This is a cruel joke." "No joke," he said, rising to stand before her. "I often escape court life by working in the gardens. Few people look closely at a man in gardener's clothes. It gives me freedom I can't find elsewhere. So you deceived me. For weeks, you let me believe." Tabitha's voice caught, the betrayal sharp and unexpected. "I never meant to hurt you," Wilhelm said, reaching for her hand, which she quickly withdrew. That first morning, I was simply going to correct your planting and leave. But then we talked, and for the first time in years, someone saw me, not my title or my connection to the imperial family, but me. And what was I? A diversion? An amusing peasant to study? You are, the most authentic person I've ever known, he said, his voice rough with emotion. With you, in that garden, I could be honest in a way I haven't been since childhood. Tabitha shook her head, tears threatening to spill from beneath her mask. Honesty doesn't involve pretending to be someone you're not. You're right, he conceded. I should have told you sooner. But I feared losing what we had. With each day, it became harder to imagine returning to my life without those moments with you. A distant clock struck midnight, and Tabitha remembered her aunt, who would surely be searching for her by now. I must go, she said, gathering her skirts. Tabitha, please. Wilhelm caught her arm gently. The ball continues tomorrow night. Meet me here, at this bench, when the clock strikes 11. Let me explain properly, without masks or pretense. She hesitated, years of caution warring with the undeniable connection she felt to this man, both as Warren the gardener and as the mysterious dancer who had sought her out among all the nobility of Europe. I make no promises, she said finally, pulling away. That's fair, he replied. But know this, every word we spoke in that garden was true. Every feeling, every shared confidence, all of it was real. Tabitha fled back toward the palace, her thoughts in turmoil. Behind her, Wilhelm stood motionless in the moonlight, watching her disappear into the glittering throng. The following day passed in a haze of confusion for Tabitha. She pleaded illness to avoid her aunt's interrogation about the previous night, particularly her prolonged absence during which, the Countess reported with visible disappointment, Archduke Ferdinand himself had apparently been seeking introductions to eligible young ladies. Alone in her room, Tabitha replayed every conversation with Wilhelm, searching for clues she might have missed. How could she have been so blind? The educated speech he occasionally lapsed into, his knowledge of court politics he claimed to have overheard from the nobles, his unexplained absences whenever official functions were taking place. Yet beneath her sense of betrayal lay a more troubling realization: she missed him. Not the Archduke's cousin or the imperial officer, but the man who had taught her about violets and listened to her dreams without judgment. As evening approached and her aunt sent maids to help her prepare for the second night of the imperial ball, Tabitha made a decision. She would meet him at the appointed time, hear his explanation, and then, what? The gulf between them remained as vast as ever. Whatever friendship or perhaps more that had blossomed in their garden sanctuary could not survive the harsh realities of their positions. The ball that night was, if possible, even more elaborate than the previous evening. Rumors had spread that the Archduke might announce his preference for a bride, and the atmosphere crackled with anticipation and rivalry. Tabitha, wearing a simpler mask of ivory lace and a gown of pale gold, kept to the periphery, counting the hours until 11. She successfully avoided Count Esterhazy but could not escape her aunt's critical gaze or pointed introductions to a succession of minor nobles. At 10:30, she made her excuses and slipped away, navigating the less crowded corridors until she reached the terrace from the night before. The gardens below were illuminated by strategically placed lanterns, creating pools of warm light amid the darkness. As she descended the steps, Tabitha's resolve wavered. What did she hope to achieve by meeting him? Any future between them was impossible. A garden friendship between a disgraced English lady and an imperial cousin could only end in further heartbreak. She had nearly convinced herself to turn back when she reached the cherry tree and saw Wilhelm already waiting. He wore no mask tonight, and his uniform had been exchanged for simpler evening attire. He looked, she thought with a pang, more like Warren than the imperial officer of the previous night. "You came," he said, standing as she approached. Relief and something deeper shone in his eyes. "I wasn't certain you would." "Nor was I," Tabitha admitted, removing her mask. There seemed little point in hiding behind it now. Wilhelm gestured to the bench, and they sat with a careful distance between them, the silence stretching until Tabitha could bear it no longer. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Was it amusing to watch me dig in the dirt while ignorant of your true identity?" No, he said firmly. Never that. The truth is both simpler and more complicated. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. I've been adjutant to my cousin for 3 years, following him across Europe on diplomatic missions. The work is important but constraining. I found myself suffocating beneath the weight of protocol and expectations. Wilhelm turned to face her directly. Last year, while we were stationed in England, I visited Kew Gardens. The head gardener there showed me how plants from across the empire could thrive together if one understood their needs. It was a revelation, this world governed by natural laws rather than human artifice. So you became a gardener, Tabitha said softly. I became a student of gardening, he corrected. When we returned to Vienna, I persuaded the imperial gardener to take me on as an assistant during my free hours. It was meant to be a private respite, nothing more. Then you arrived with your violets and your determination, and suddenly my sanctuary became something else entirely. The sincerity in his voice was impossible to dismiss, yet Tabitha remained wary. You could have told me the truth at any point. At first, I didn't see the harm in maintaining the pretense. It was refreshing to be judged on my knowledge of plants rather than my pedigree. Then, as we grew closer, I feared the truth would change how you saw me. It has, Tabitha acknowledged, but not in the way you might think. I'm not impressed by your title, Wilhelm. I'm hurt by your lack of trust. He flinched at her words. You're right. I betrayed your trust, and for that, I am truly sorry. Wilhelm reached for her hand, and this time, Tabitha did not pull away. But please believe that every confidence shared, every moment in that garden was genuine. I have never been more myself than when I was with you. The distant sounds of the ball filtered through the night air, music and laughter that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Even if I believe you, Tabitha said, where does that leave us? You are cousin to the Archduke. I am a diplomatic embarrassment, tolerated only because of my aunt's connections. Is that how you see yourself? Wilhelm asked, his voice gentle. Because I see a woman of extraordinary courage and integrity. Someone who has faced scandal and loss yet remains unbowed. Pretty words, Tabitha murmured, but they don't change the reality of our positions. Wilhelm's grip on her hand tightened. What if they could? What if there were a way forward for us? Before Tabitha could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. Down the path came 2 figures, one resplendent in the white and gold uniform of the Archduke, the other a severe-looking older man Tabitha recognized as Baron Turnbull, the British ambassador. Wilhelm stood quickly, positioning himself slightly in front of Tabitha as if to shield her from view. Ah, there you are, cousin, the Archduke called, his tone light but his expression curious as he took in the scene before him. And with company, I see. Your Imperial Highness, Wilhelm bowed formally. May I present Miss Tabitha Thornhill? Tabitha curtsied deeply, her mind racing. Why was the British ambassador accompanying the Archduke, and why did he look at her with such intensity? Miss Thornhill, the Archduke inclined his head. I believe Baron Turnbull has been most anxious to speak with you. The Baron stepped forward, his expression grave. Miss Thornhill, I bring news from London regarding your late father. Tabitha felt the blood drain from her face. What fresh humiliation awaited her now? New evidence has come to light, the Baron continued. Documents that conclusively prove your father was not responsible for the missing funds. It appears he was deliberately framed by a colleague who has since confessed. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My father was innocent. Entirely so, the Baron confirmed. His Majesty's government wishes to extend its deepest apologies for this grave injustice. Your father's name has been officially cleared, and reparations will be made to you as his sole heir. Tabitha swayed slightly, and Wilhelm's hand came to rest at the small of her back, steadying her. I don't understand, she managed. How did this come about after all this time? The Baron and the Archduke exchanged glances, and it was the latter who spoke. I believe my cousin has been rather busy behind the scenes, Ferdinand said, his eyes twinkling with something like approval. Diplomatic communications, inquiries through unofficial channels, he can be quite persistent when motivated. Tabitha turned to Wilhelm in astonishment. You did this? I made inquiries, he said quietly. After you told me your father maintained his innocence until the end. I believed you, believed him, and thought perhaps with the right pressure, the truth might emerge. But why would you? Because I love you, Wilhelm said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Because I couldn't bear to see you carry a burden that was never yours to bear. The Archduke cleared his throat. Perhaps we should give these two some privacy, Baron. I believe they have matters to discuss that don't require an audience, imperial or otherwise. As they turned to leave, Ferdinand paused. Oh, and cousin? Do remember you're expected to make an appearance at the announcement in an hour. After all, I can hardly name you as my chief diplomatic envoy to England if you're hiding in the gardens. With that parting remark, the Archduke and the Baron retreated down the path, leaving Tabitha and Wilhelm alone beneath the cherry blossoms once more. England? Tabitha whispered. Wilhelm's smile was tentative but hopeful. I may have suggested to my cousin that Anglo-Austrian relations could benefit from a more permanent diplomatic presence in London. Someone familiar with both cultures, perhaps with connections to English horticulture. And he agreed? Just like that. Ferdinand and I have always been more than cousins. He understands the value of allowing people to pursue their true callings. Wilhelm took both her hands in his. Tabitha, I know this is sudden, and I have no right to ask anything of you after my deception. But would you consider a future where we might continue what began in that garden? Not as lady and gardener, or even as diplomat and heiress, but as two people who found something rare and precious when neither was pretending to be anything but themselves. Tabitha looked up at him, this man who had first appeared to her as a simple gardener and who had, in that guise, shown her more of his true self than most nobles revealed in a lifetime of court appearances. I would need time, she said carefully. Time to know you as Wilhelm as well as I knew Warren. Time is the one thing I can promise in abundance, he replied, lifting her hand to his lips. That, and a garden wherever we go. Above them, the cherry blossoms stirred in the night breeze, a few petals drifting down to rest upon their shoulders like a benediction. And as Wilhelm drew her gently into his arms, Tabitha thought that perhaps, like the violets they had tended together, some things did need space and patience to bloom, but when they did, the result was all the more beautiful for the waiting. In the distance, the palace clock began to strike 11, each chime marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. By the time the final note faded into the spring night, Tabitha had made her choice, sealing it with a kiss beneath the same peach blossoms that had witnessed their first meeting, a kiss that tasted of new beginnings and gardens yet to be planted.